At the corner of the archives room of the University Museum hangs a portrait of Professor Maxwell Somerville in 1893. He is depicted by his life's work, a collection of engraved gems and talismans, including a giant stone in the bottom left corner known as the Triumph of Constantine. The professor stares at us as if promising to unveil the secrets of these ancient objects, which now are part of the collection of this museum. The 70-year-old professor is by all accounts an imposing figure. His work and larger-than-life persona elicited mixed reactions throughout his career, as well as after his death. He certainly had admirers, but not all held him in high esteem. Somerville's nemesis, the eminent curator Stuart Cullen, then director of the University Museum, regarded him a fraud and identified him as a man in search of an audience. Despite Somerville's prominence during his lifetime, a good deal about his life has now been lost in obscurity. We know that he was born in 1829 in Clarksburg, now West Virginia, and the extent of his formal education is a diploma from the renowned Central High School in Philadelphia. During the Civil War period, he made money in the printing business, which allowed him to travel the world. His interest in precious talismans came from his grandfather, James McAlpin, who was a collector. McAlpin was also a Freemason and introduced young Max to the principles of the obscure practice.
With respects to the gem collection is that his maternal grandfather collected gems. And that's where he first became interested in them. They were very easy to collect. They were very common. The gem collecting started with the great libraries and royal collections in Italy and in Paris, and then into the St. Petersburg. But then after the discovery of Pompeii and Herculaneum, there was all this neoclassical material, and the interest in mythology was reborn, and gem carvers flourished in Italy and elsewhere in Europe, so that there was this flourish of material to collect. In the course of his travels, he put together this very large collection of gemstones and amulets and a few metal talismans, and the bulk of the collection, and we're guessing about 2,500 pieces of small gems. But it wasn't all neoclassical material. I mean, that was the core of the material that he was collecting, was neoclassical. But there were Babylonian and Persian and Egyptian pieces. There were some Central American pieces, some Asian pieces, some Hindu pieces, all carved materials.
The best way to get a sense of Somerville's voice and passion for his field is in his 1889 Dyeristic Book, Engraved Gems, Their History and an Elaborate View of Their Place in Art. From it we learn how strongly he felt that these engraved gems were microcosms of entire cultures. The book includes 100 remarkable engravings based on Somerville's drawings, varying from depictions of objects to anecdotal illustrations of his shopping experiences. This indicates the professor's perception that his life experiences and acquisitions were closely linked. 5 years after the publication of this hefty volume, he got the recognition he must have wanted. He was made professor of glyptology at the University of Pennsylvania. But what was glyptology? Somerville had apparently coined a name for the study of precious engraved gems and then lobbied for its recognition in academia. At some point, Somerville developed a fascination with Buddhism, which became his second specialty. Driven by his intense lobbying, the museum eventually agreed to install an entire Buddhist temple on its new premises. Somerville spent nearly a year in a closed-off gallery, working in complete secrecy in a room from which you could only hear occasional hammering. On May 3, 1899, Somerville's Great Temple was first presented to the public. At the press preview, he emphasized that every piece of material in the room had been shipped from the East. He also stressed that it was not modeled after a specific region, but instead was meant for the use of all Buddhists regardless of their origin.
One gallery was his Buddhist temple, where he claimed that that real Buddhists could come and worship there, even though he had things from every country, Korea, Thailand, Japan, you name it, all together in one big room. And he had the second hall was for his gem collection. And he would dress up in Buddhist robes to give lectures and tours of his gallery.
Judging from the photographs of the dense room, the so-called temple was more of an improvised shrine with hundreds of diverse objects, including divinities, bells, drums, lanterns, paintings, and other ornaments. Somerville also sought to demonstrate worship activities in the temple. From what we know, he certainly appeared more interested in an audience seeing him perform than learning. He was thus not only the first to install a temple inside an American museum and attempt interpretive history through the theater and the galleries, but may also have been the precursor of edutainment, learning through spectacle.
He complained bitterly that Philadelphians never properly recognized him, that when he went to Europe, people were like, oh, Maxwell Somerville, you know, great scholar, famous traveler. Philadelphia, nobody cared, and he felt that he was underappreciated in the museum as well, that he fought bitterly with, well, a couple of the other curators.
Cullen was among the skeptics of the project. He later revealed that Somerville himself told him that he had constructed most of the temple's architectural fragments using the wood of the crates that held the objects. This way he could still say that every piece in the room had come from the East. Somerville died in 1904, bequeathing his collection to the museum. Only then was the authenticity of the gems and other objects openly put into question by experts in the field. Most poignantly, the triumph of Constantine, the prize stone that is depicted in his proud portrait for posterity, is not what it purports to be. The depiction is not one of Emperor Constantine, but a reproduction of a relief located in the Ark of Titus in Rome. Furthermore, ever since the turn of the century, it was pointed out that a similar piece exists in the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna, and that these type of cameos were part of a European workshop of modern fakes. Yet Somerville's legacy should not be entirely discarded. Not everything he collected was forged, and the collection as a whole still holds great value in providing a portrait of an era of decorative art collecting.
He was interested in the subject matter. He really wasn't interested in the date of the objects, the authenticity of the objects. When he talks about them he published the first 1,500 of them. He talks about, well, they're carnelian, or he names the stone. He tells you if it's a cameo or an intaglio carving. And then he talks about what's represented on the images.
He also created the first immersive museum environment, presenting a strong desire to communicate his enthusiasm for other times and cultures, and expressed his innate performative quality that, nowadays, would have made him an inspired installation and performance artist.